My dad happened to be in the investment business, so I would go down to his office on Saturdays. And so at age probably 7 or something, I started reading these books that were around the place. And so I had a 15-year jump on many people in a sense, and that helped a lot. And I was always fascinated by it. I knew what I wanted to do early, and I think that's a huge advantage too. And then you don't need a lot of brains in this business. I mean, I've always said if you got an IQ of 160, give away 30 points to somebody else because you don't need it in investments. What you do need is emotional stability. You have to be able to think independently, and you have to be when you come to a conclusion, you have to really not care what other people say and just follow the facts and follow your reasoning. And that's tough for a lot of people. That part I think I was just lucky with. I was born that way. It never bothered me if people disagreed with what I thought, as long as I felt I knew the facts. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things I don't know a thing about. I just stay away from those. So I stay within what I call my circle of competence. And Tom Watson said it best. He said, I'm no genius, but I'm smart in spots, and I stay around those spots. Well, I try and stay around those spots, and I just don't have a problem if somebody says, you're wrong on something. I go back and look at the facts, and I think that really is much more important, frankly, than having a few points of IQ or having an extra course or two in school or anything of the sort. You need emotional stability. I've got this rule, the first rule is don't lose, and the second rule is never forget the first rule. So it really isn't so much having a lot of brilliant decisions. It's just not really having some terrible ones. Then he taught that famous lesson about a margin of safety, that you don't drive a truck that weighs 9,900 pounds across a bridge that says limit 10,000 pounds, because you can't be that sure about it. If you see something like that, you go down a little further down the road and you find one that says limit 20,000 pounds, and that's the one you drive across. I've never forgotten it. A lot of luck. I mean, just being born in the United States in 1930, the odds were like 30 to 1 against me. I mean, I didn't have anything to do with picking the United States. I was sort of wired for capital allocation, and being wired for capital allocation a couple of 100 years ago in Nebraska wouldn't have been a thing. And even now, being born in various parts of the world, it wouldn't have meant much. But here I was in this soon-to-be very rich capitalistic system, and it just so happened that what I did paid off enormously in a market system like we have. And if I'd had a talent in some other area that was way less commercial, I mean, I would have had a good time doing it, but it wouldn't have paid off like this. But of course, Jay said it perfectly when he talked about, he's in there recording for himself, and the money comes afterwards. I mean, I got to do what I love. I mean, and it doesn't get any luckier than that. If you can spend your lifetime, and I'm 80 now, and doing things you love every single day. I mean, I would be doing what I do now, and I would have done it in the past, if the payoff had been in seashells or shark's teeth or anything else. If you can go to work every morning, I tap dance to work, and I come down, and every day's exciting. So that is lucky. I mean, that didn't have to happen that way. If I'd been born in 1930, if I'd been born a female, if I'd been born black, I would not have had the same opportunities that I had. I mean, it's chance. I mean, my parents loved my sisters just as much as they loved me. My sisters are just as smart or smarter than I am and all of that, but they didn't have the same expectations in the 30s for a young smart girl as they had for a young smart guy. And so I've had all kinds of luck. I had the luck of, I got turned down by Harvard. Well, getting turned down by Harvard meant I got to study under Ben Graham at Columbia, which changed my life. All kinds of things have worked out. So I just hope I stay lucky. I've been lucky for 80 years. I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. I mean, that doesn't mean that industries stay good forever or businesses stay good forever, but learning to think about business models. What I learned at 20 is useful to me now. What I learned at 25 is useful to me now. And so it's not a field that changes dramatically in terms of the underlying principles. It's like physics. I mean, there's underlying principles. Now they're doing all kinds of things with physics they weren't doing 50 years ago. But if you know if you got the principles, if you know what makes a good business, if you know what makes a good manager, if you know what makes a good product, and you learn that in one business, there is some transference to other businesses as you go along, and you learn what things you're not going to understand. I mean, knowing what to leave out is just as important as knowing what to focus on. And I don't think I can win every game. You know, somebody said, "How do you beat Bobby Fischer?" You play him any game except chess. So I don't play Bobby Fischer chess. And there's a lot of value to learning that over time and learning what you're good at and what you're not good at. The most important thing is to be able to define which ones you can come to an intelligent decision on and which ones are beyond your capacity to evaluate. You don't have to be right about thousands and thousands and thousands of companies. You only have to be right about a couple. I met Bill Gates on July 5th, 1991. We were out in Seattle, and Bill said, "You've got to have a computer." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well," he said, "you can do your income tax on it." I said, "I don't have any income. Berkshire doesn't pay a dividend." He said, "Well, you can keep track of your portfolio." And I said, "I only have one stock." I said, I mean, and he says, "It's going to change everything." And I said, "Well, will it change whether people chew gum?" And he said, "Well, probably not." And I said, "Well, will it change what kind of gum they chew?" And not. And I said, "Well, then I'll stick to chewing gum and you stick to computers." You know, I don't have to understand all kinds of business. There's all kinds of business I don't understand, but there's thousands of opportunities there. I did understand the Bank of America, you know, and I'll be able. I'm able to do that. I'm able to understand some given percentage. But Ted Williams wrote a book called The Science of Hitting, and in The Science of Hitting, he's got a diagram, shows him at the plate, and he's got the strike zone divided into 77 squares, each the size of a baseball. And he says, if I only swing at pitches in my sweet zone, which he shows there, and he has what his batting average would be, which is 400. If he had to swing at low outside pitches, but still in the strike zone, his average would be 230. He said the most important thing in hitting is waiting for the right pitch. Now, he was at a disadvantage because if the count was 0-2 or 1-2 or so on, even if that ball was down where he was only going to bat 230, he had to swing at it. In investing, there's no called strikes. People can throw Microsoft at me and, you know, you name it, any stock, General Motors, and I don't have to swing. And nobody's going to call me out on called strikes. I only get a strike called if I swing at a pitch and miss. So I can wait there and look at thousands of companies day after day, and only when I see something I understand and when I like the price at which it's selling, then if I swing, if I hit it, fine. If I miss it, it's a strike. But it's an enormously advantageous game. And it's a terrible mistake to think you have to have an opinion on everything. You only have to have an opinion on a few things. In fact, I've told students, if when they got out of school, they got a punch card with 20 punches on it, and that's all the investment decisions they got to make in their entire life, they would get very rich because they would think very hard about each one. And you don't need 20 right decisions to get very rich. You know, 4 or 5 will probably do it over time. So I don't worry too much about the things I don't understand. If you understand some of these businesses that are coming along and can spot things on, if you can spot on Amazon, for example, I mean, it's a tremendous accomplishment what Jeff Bezos has done. And I tip my hat to him. He's a wonderful businessman. He's a good guy, too. But could I have anticipated that he would be the success and 10 others wouldn't be? I'm not good enough to do that. But fortunately, I don't have to. You know, I don't have to form an opinion on Amazon. And I did form an opinion on the Bank of America, and I formed an opinion on Coca-Cola. I mean, Coca-Cola's been around since 1886. There's 1.8 billion 8-ounce servings of Coca-Cola products sold every day. Now, if you take 1 penny and get 1 penny extra, that's $18 million a day. And 18 million times 365 is 7 billion, 3 less 730 billion, or $6,570 million. So annually, $6,570 million from 1 penny. Do you think Coca-Cola is worth a penny more than, you know, Joe's Cola? I think so. So, you know, and I've got about 127 years of history that would indicate it. So those are the kind of decisions I like to make. And you may have an entirely different field of expertise than I would have, and probably much more up to date in terms of the kind of businesses that we're seeing evolve. And you can get very rich if you just understand a few of them and understand their future.
How would you recommend an individual investor who follows the Graham and Dodd philosophy to allocate their capital today?
Well, it depends whether they're going to be an active investor. Graham distinguished between the defensive and the enterprising investor. If you're going to spend a lot of time on investment, you know, I just advise looking at as many things as possible, and you will find some bargains. And when you find them, you have to act. It hasn't changed at all since I was here in 1951, and it won't change the rest of my life. So you start turning pages. When I got out of school, I turned every page in Moody's, 10,000 some pages twice, you know, looking for companies, and you have to find them yourself. The world isn't going to tell you about great deals. You have to find them yourself, and that takes a fair amount of time. So if you're not going to do that, if you're just going to be a passive investor, then I just advise an index fund bought consistently over a long period of time. The one thing I will tell you is that the worst investment you can have is cash. Everybody's talking about cash being king and all that sort of thing, but most of you don't look like you're overburdened with cash anyway. So, but you know, cash is going to become worth less over time, but good businesses are going to become worth more over time, and you don't want to pay too much for them, so you have to have some discipline about what you pay. But the thing to do is find a good business and stick with it.
Does that mean you think that we are through the roughest times? You'd always kept a cash hoard around too.
Well, we always keep enough cash around so I feel very comfortable and don't worry about sleeping at night. But it's not because I like cash as an investment. Cash is a bad investment over time. But you always want to have enough so that nobody else can determine your future, essentially. The financial panic is behind us. The economic spillout, which came to some extent from that financial panic, it's still with us. It will end. I don't know whether it'll end tomorrow or next week or next month or maybe a year, but it won't go on forever. And to sit around and try and pick the bottom, people were trying to do that last March, and you know, the bottom hadn't come in unemployment, the bottom hadn't come in business, but the bottom had come in stocks. So don't pass up something that's attractive today because you hope you're going to find something way more attractive tomorrow.